Let's talk about tropes. If you don't know what a trope is, it basically means storytelling elements that are significant or recurring in a lot of stories. They have an entire page dedicated on it called TV tropes, or all the tropes if you want an alternative. Perversion is a trope, and a trope can be manipulated in so many ways. It's called playing with tropes. I have two scenarios for this specific instance. The first scenario is where the trope is being played straight. In the case of Perversion, a character peeks into a girl's room to look at their tits. In the second scenario, this trope is subverted, which means that it was set up to be played straight, but turns out that it's actually not. For example, a character appears to be peeking into the girl's room, only to find out that he's actually peeking into something else entirely. Now that you know the basic of what a trope is, how it's being played straight, and how it's being subverted, I want you all to keep that in mind for this video. It's been a while, isn't it? Extra credits. This is a video titled Perversion Subversion, which is exactly what I explained last time. Extra credits is going to talk about all of these perversion tropes, so let's get into it.
The Japanese language has a handful of words describing a concept that, again, we really don't have proper terminology for in English. These are words like hentai, or its milder derivative, ecchi. They essentially mean lewd or perverted, but they don't come with quite the same baggage that those words do in English.
Well, I have a little bit of theory for that, but it's a wild guess, so correct me if I'm wrong with this. If I gather in hundreds and hundreds of women from Western countries and women from Japan, who are more likely to be more comfortable and open when talking about sex? Whose sex lives are more varying and open? In my observation, the Western countries are a lot more open in terms of sex lives. Hell, there was a statistic that shows how Asian people have sex later in their lives when compared to the Western people. All of this despite how common ecchi anime are in Japan, how people sexualize almost everything in Japan, and yet some people say that there are too many Japanese virgins. I have a link for the Japanese man Yuta's video in the description, go check it out for more info. The Japanese people are a lot more conservative and shy about sex or discussions about sex, which gives a lot more power when a Japanese person calls someone else hentai. If you're in the West and you call someone, oh, you sick, dirty pervert, people would just shrug. If you're in Japan, however, well, considering most of Asian people's conservative mindset about sex, that brings a lot more punch, especially with most of Asian girls being really shy when talking about sex. But that's just simply my theory, not sure if it's 100% accurate. I live in Asia, so I'm probably projecting some of my people's own cultural lifestyle when dealing with the topic of sex, so take this theory with a grain of salt. Also, the word hentai can refer to multiple things. Hentai can either mean Japanese anime porn or pervert depending on the context of the word being used. I will show you two different seeds that fit into each definition.
Hentai? Hentai games.
Ecchi simply means sexy or naughty or dirty or anime that are sexy but doesn't reach into full-blown hentai territories. Some people also use the word ero from the word erotic to describe how sexy people are.
This hentai sensibility can range from relatively innocuous double entendres to the more disturbing or uncomfortable moments, like the accidental boob grab, looking up a girl's skirt, or spying on them while they're bathing, accidentally or otherwise.
All of these are common perversion tropes. Let's save them for later.
Interestingly, I've noticed a few Japanese games lately that are consciously exploring this trope and subverting it, calling attention to, or steering away from, the leering and non-consensual aspects of this stuff, and instead using zany humor or context to make it easier for us to discuss and question the things which society has taught us are embarrassing to talk about.
Well, I'm not sure what makes it so difficult or embarrassing to be talking about sex in Western countries. You guys have sex a hell of a lot more than us, pure-blooded Asians. Why is sex suddenly a taboo topic to discuss out there? It's taboo for us because a lot of the countries in Asia are still built out of traditional conservative values, either through religion or other means. We consider sexy and lewd things to be depraved and immoral. You guys don't really have to care about that unless you grow up in a region which discussions of sex are made taboo, or there's a certain ideology that constrains your discussion about it. My question is, what's making people in Western countries embarrassed on talking about sex when they are more active on sex than anyone else in any part of the world?
Today, I want to talk about two games. One that does this well, and one that does this poorly.
The one that does it well is Yakuza 0. Why Yakuza 0? Well, let me show you. In Yakuza 0, the first perversion subversion trope is the in-game collectibles of trading cards of real-life Japanese porn actresses. After you collect all of these trading cards, you are confronted with this guy, which is basically the game's way of saying, "Ha ha, you freaking hentai." The second example is a side quest of a little boy wanting to get something out of a vending machine. The only problem is the vending machine that he's referring to is the vending machine of adult magazines. The subversion here is that the player character Kazuma Kiryu, who was not treated well as a child, sees himself in this kid. So he uses this opportunity to treat this kid to get the magazine and give it to him so that the same thing that happened to him doesn't happen to this kid. The third example is the dominatrix. The girl wants to boost her confidence up and act brave, so she becomes a dominatrix, but unfortunately, she's way too polite, so the main character has to find a way to make sure that she can act aggressively as a dominatrix. Now, all of these examples are what extra credits considered good examples of the perversion subversion. Why are these good examples? Well, the first one isn't a subversion. The perversion trope is being played straight initially, but then in the end, it insults the player for doing it, therefore making it a deconstruction, which basically means playing a trope straight initially only to have consequences that are in some ways realistic, and it was mostly done to mock the idea of the trope in the first place. The second one also isn't a subversion. A subversion would require the trope to not happen. Kazuma Kiryu wouldn't grab the porn magazine from the vending machine. This one, however, he does, and he has a reason, which makes it a justified trope. If a perversion trope is justified, then what happens is it would have a lot more reasonable explanation within it other than just, oh, this guy is just perverted. If you go back to the scenarios that extra credits gave last time, a justified accidental boob grab would be if a character does the accidental boob grab to plant a tracer, which makes the one who owns the boobs to think that the guy is a pervert instead of someone who stalks her for information through the tracer, etc. The boob grab happened, but there's a justification for it other than perversion. In Yakuza 0, Kiryu didn't go to the machine because he's horny. Kiryu didn't go into the machine to search for coins, but because he wants to give the magazine to a kid who wants it, and Kiryu does that because he sees part of himself inside the kid, and so on and so on and so on. The third one also isn't a subversion, it's also a justified trope. The trope is this simple BDSM setup. If it was played straight, then the dom is going to do the simple BDSM for sexual pleasure. The trope is once again justified because the dom is doing it to regain her confidence for a job and not for sexual pleasure like the sub. In the end, she still ends up as a dominatrix. A subversion would mean that the chick wears the BDSM costume to merge into the BDSM place and not actually do BDSM. There is a setup in there and a subversion. The subversion in this case, however, does not happen. What happens instead is a justification for her doing BDSM. So, according to extra credits, good examples of the perversion subversion trope are deconstruction tropes or tropes that are justified. If the perversion trope was played completely straight without any sort of repercussion,
the 30 or so ultra softcore live action videos that they made specifically for the game, which are just embarrassingly bad, though I'm not sure that the subversion's quite so successful there.
That's because there's no subversion. The perversion trope was played completely straight, the same way it was played initially straight when you were collecting the trading cards. It's clear that you have an issue with the perversion trope being played completely straight. So my guess is that the next game that you're gonna pick as a bad example of this is a game that plays the perversion trope completely straight for the pleasure of the player without any sort of consequence or justification. You know, games like Dead or Alive Extreme or Senran Kagura or Galgun, all of those games are titillating the players for the sake of titillating the players. But nope, it's actually Persona 5? Persona 5. A game that I recently played, but unfortunately it was my friend who owned a PS4, so I watched the entire thing on YouTube. Why is Persona 5 a bad example?
They start out so strong with an arc that's cognizant of the worst aspects of this trope. The boss of the first dungeon is the signature hentai character.
Signature hentai character? What do you mean, the signature hentai character? I watch a lot of hentais and even I don't know what that means. To sum it up, Kamoshida in Persona 5 is a bad guy who plays the perversion trope straight. Since he's a bad guy, it's perfectly okay for him to play this trope straight. However, the main character's being perverted, that's not okay.
But then, in the very next dungeon, the game just completely faceplants by having this whole bit where one of your characters is being pressured into doing nude art modeling. And the whole situation is presented as, isn't this funny? Because she's gonna have to get naked even though she doesn't want to. There's even this moment where her two male friends tell her that she should just go through with it. They even pressure her into doing so for the sake of the team, rather than finding some other alternate solution to the problem. Heck, your main character's even given a dialogue choice where all of the options basically boil down to making her feel bad if she doesn't strip.
Oh my god! Isn't that horrible? Akira and Ryuji begging for Lady An to be stripped? What horrible people! What absolute freaking perverts! What made them different than Kamoshida in that case? Why is An, a victim of sexual coercion, just accept this? Except, that's actually not what happened. Let's get through some proper context. One that extra credits for some reason didn't provide. And they do it just for the sake of shitting at Persona 5. You know, kind of like those amateur translators that nitpick everything. Anyway, what actually happens is, in the game, after the boss battle with Kamoshida, don't worry, he's the first boss, so there won't be too much spoilers, the current Phantom Thieves Akira, Ryuji, and An meet up with Yusuke Kitagawa, a young painter who seeks for Lady An as a model for his painting. There are rumors that Yusuke's mentor Madarame is plagiarizing his students' work. The team decided to investigate if the rumor is true. Unfortunately, the first investigation led Akira and Ryuji to be kicked out by Yusuke and to never come back to the place again. When Yusuke kicked them out, Yusuke revealed that he wanted An to be his nude model. In order for a second investigation to occur, An absolutely needs to strip for Yusuke because Ryuji and Akira cannot help her. That's why the dialogue choices are all begging for An to do it, because at that moment, there's no other choice. And your complaint is...
They even pressure her into doing so for the sake of the team, rather than finding some other alternate solution to the problem.
If you want this scene to be done differently because OMG non-consensual strip is triggering you, make a different game. This is actually an example of a justified trope. You know, a form of trope that you just praised last time. Thanks to your questionable bias towards rape victims or the subject of non-consensual sexual activities in general, you treat this scene as if it was sinful, horrible, deplorable, all because An didn't really want to do it and she was pressured to do it. You don't care that the team need to access something inside Madarame's place. You don't care that the two men are also concerned about her as well. Nope, you only care on the fact that she doesn't consent to it. Cry me a freaking river. Listen, there are so many things that the characters in the game don't consent to. Akira doesn't consent to be falsely accused of crime. Akira doesn't consent to be identified as a fugitive. Akira doesn't consent on being treated like a fugitive in the entire school. And you're concerned about how An couldn't consent on her stripping for the mission? Calm your freaking tits down, man. Jesus Christ. It's interesting to note that as you're taking this scene so unnecessarily seriously, the entire scene where An tries to strip, it was all played for laughs. An piled up clothes after clothes after clothes so that it can technically mean strip. Her notoriously bad acting that somehow works for everyone. Oh no, it's horrible. She doesn't want to do it. There are tons of characters in Persona 5 that don't want to do the things they do, but they have to do it. But screw them. My Lady An, please save her. And since we're talking about perversion, what does this scene have anything to do with the aforementioned perversion tropes? Are you implying that Ryuji and Akira are just perverted bastards who want poor Lady An to strip? You're painting the scenario as if Ryuji and Akira are actual perverts and playing the trope straight. What actually happens in that scene is Ryuji and Akira had to beg to An to get into the building for investigation, not because they actually want to see her nude. Oh, let's not forget the fact that they kicked off of the apartment, which means that they can't see her. What's the point of them asking for An to strip if they weren't going to see her anyway? And here's the strangest part of this entire thing. You are actually correct. Wait, in which part you are correct? Well, you are correct in the part that Ryuji and Akira are perverts. The only problem is, you picked the wrong scene. In the entire game, there are two scenes in which this trope is played straight, with no change whatsoever, involving both Akira and Ryuji. This scene...
How are the guys? Take this!
And this scene.
Got a better opinion of me now? What? Cat got your tongue? Come on.
Although the last one is more Ryuji than Akira, to be honest, those are two scenes in which the perversion trope is played completely straight and would have been a great example to use for this video, but you didn't use them for some reason because, oh god, my waifu has to strip and she doesn't want to. Hell, speaking of Persona, why stop at 5? Remember this scene from Persona 4?
Dang, I thought you'd look good, but not that good. I mean, you still look like little girls, but I'm sure someday when you finally grow up, you'll be pretty hot.
Whoa! Are you guys okay down there?
Kanji?
Yes, I know it's from the animation, but I played the original game and I tried to make sure that the scenes that I chose also exist in the original, or at least close to it. Or what about this scene?
Okay, Teddy, you can start by telling us what all the girls' measurements are.
Damn you, Yosuke, you stinking pervert! Naoto, this says you're stacked.
What?
They didn't get the measurement wrong, did they?
This information is freaking me out. I don't know how to take it.
Try taking a cold shower!
Look, the only thing important here is that the doctors were unable to find any physical problems with Teddy. The results are irrelevant. We're all healthy.
Aren't you even the least bit curious, Kanji?
Huh? About what?
Naoto, big melons or not.
What? What the hell are you asking me? I didn't look at her tits, I swear!
Okay.
Or this scene from Persona 4 Golden.
There you are. Jeez, no point being embarrassed now.
Wait, Rise-san?
Come on, just get inside.
Jeez.
Oh, I see. So, the truth comes out now, huh? What's gotten into you all?
Extra credits. You have so many examples of this trope in Persona being played completely straight, and it was directed towards the main characters. All of these scenes would support your argument, and yet you chose the one scene that doesn't represent your argument well. You chose a scene with a trope that was completely justified and in no way going to tell the audience the message, Ryuji and Akira are horrible perverts. I have no issue of you using Persona 5 as a bad example. I have an issue of you picking up scenes, misrepresenting them, and taking them completely out of context just because of your personal bias against non-consensual sex activities towards your freaking waifu. I have an issue with you not holding the same standards that you hold for your previous good examples.
Then there's this other moment where you find out that your homeroom teacher moonlights as a hostess, and your main character functionally threatens to blackmail her for sex.
I feel so bad for Kawakami. 2 freaking blackmails.
Oops, spoilers.
Yep, Akira was definitely trying to blackmail her for services. Forget the fact that he called the maid for the lulz with Ryuji and Mishima and accidentally found her in result. No. Akira blackmailed her deliberately because he's a misogynist or something. Forget the fact that he also saved her later on from her problems and she made him to slack off at school. Forget the entire backstory of her being blackmailed, which forced her to work as a maid. Forget the fact that you have to pay 5,000 yen every single time you want to ask for a service. What was about characters being humanized again? Context? What the flying fuck is that?
And of course, there's an option to romance her without any discussion of the power dynamics in a student-teacher relationship, or what, even in many Japanese prefectures, would be considered an underage relationship.
No discussion about the power dynamics between teacher and student. Wow. Have you actually played the game, Extra Credits? Didn't you get sick of that, oh, but I'm your teacher and you're my student statement that she said like 90% of the freaking time? I mean, for God's sake, why? Why do you have to shit on Persona 5 for the sake of shitting at Persona 5? Persona 5 did nothing wrong. You are just wrong.
Like, the team wanted their game to deal in serious issues, to impress us with how aware and conscientious it was with these things, but they didn't have the dedication to properly explore or subvert those old tropes every time they fell back on them.
No, what I see here is you deliberately misrepresenting Persona 5 just so that you can shit on it because you have something to say about non-consensual sexual activities.
Persona 5 ends up being a perfect example of the other side of this coin.
All right, everybody, keep your cool!
It's really important that we don't just shrug off that kind of gross misstep. If nothing else, Persona 5 shows us just how very aware we have to be of what our content is actually saying.
No, you need to be aware of how you interpret said content because none of your Persona 5 examples are in any way supportive of your arguments.
And don't misunderstand me, I am absolutely not suggesting that we should be afraid of using sexual humor.
Except when the perversion trope is being played straight, which in that case, it's sexualization, objectification, normalization of rape, sexual coercion, and it shouldn't be tolerated and normalized. I am not kidding.
But there's a fine line between racy humor and leering objectification. Yakuza 0 convinced me that this type of hentai humor can be used for good, And Persona 5 showed me just how valuable it can be to start a serious discussion about the harmful side of such behavior, even though it stumbles into glorifying that same behavior barely hours later. Overall, games like these have made me cognizant of just how careful we have to be with this particular aesthetic, to make sure that we aren't celebrating sexual acts without consent, violations of privacy, or pressuring people into sexual things that they're not comfortable with.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, extra moral guardian credits lecturing you about how it's not okay that people do things that they don't want to do but have to do it. You know, there's something that I just noticed. What if we replace perversion trope with violence trope? Before we end this video, huge thanks to Nathan for the pledge on Patreon. You are fantastic. That's all for the video today. If you like this, you can go ahead, click the like button, and subscribe for more. If you wish, you can support me on Patreon. And thanks for watching.